Hello, and welcome to this week's Thursday on the Stoop. Today we have Reduce, Reuse, Recycle with Alison Lubar. Um, Alison teaches high school English by day and yoga by night. They are a queer, non-binary, mixed-race femme whose life work, aside from wordsmithing, has evolved into bringing mindfulness practices and sometimes even poetry to young people. Their work has been nominated for both the Pushcart and Best of the Net, and they're the author of 4 chapbooks: Philosophers Know Nothing About Love from 30 West, Queer Feast from Bottle Cap Pressed, Sweet Euphemism from Clash, and It Skips a Generation with Stanchion. You can find out more at AlisonLubar.com, which I'll post in the chat momentarily, or on Twitter at the original Alison, or the origin Alison. I see it now. Thanks for being here. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Julian. Thank you so much, Blue Stoop. Thank you to all of you who chose to spend an hour this beautiful sunny day with me. Hopefully it's sunny where you are. This is Reduce, Reuse, and Recycle, a revision workshop. Also, I realized I'm also a hoarder, and that's why this is a digital hoarder. Julian and I were talking about the numbers of tabs that we have open on our computer, which could be embarrassing. Yeah, but welcome. So we'll get into it. So just as a little introduction for all of you, if you want to go around, and again, this is being recorded, so you don't have to share anything you don't feel comfortable sharing. You don't want to share your pronouns, you don't want to share your name, no worries. But as a little icebreaker, I'd love to hear names, pronouns, and your icebreaker is, what's today's flavor? Is it sweet, salty, bittersweet, spicy? Is it just like umami, period? Like, what is the flavor of your day? And I'm gonna say mine is a little salty, but mostly sweet. Like a little salty. Anyone else? And you're always welcome to put responses in the chat.
Mine is bitter. Mona Mijas, she, her. Mine is kind of bitter mostly.
Yeah, absolutely valid, Mona. Thank you so much for being here. And just if you put something in the chat, I'm going to say that that's consent for me to read it. And if you would like to rescind that right now, I'm going to give you a moment to do so.
Okay. So I'll go while we give people that chance. I'm Melissa, she, Ella, and I'm consuming sweet, but probably giving bitter.
I love that. I love that. Magnus, hey.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I go by Magnus or Maggie. She, they pronouns. I don't really know what today's flavor is. I haven't eaten anything yet. Sorry. Probably leaning like sweet and salty.
Yes, excellent. Like I don't know, chocolate dipped potato chips kind of vibe. I mean, this workshop has nothing to do with food, but many of mine do, so I think that's why. All right, so in the chat we have Julian, he, him, sour, but in a fun way. We have Sarah, they, them, bittersweet dark chocolate. Excellent, very specific. Love. Fran B, salty caramel, like the sea. Chris, she, her, sweet day for me here today. Rachel, she, her, sweet, I think, emoji. Shauna, they, she, pickled. I love that. So good. Anyone else wanna?
I can go. Hi everyone, I'm Krishna, she, her, and I will say my flavor today. I think I just had something sweet, so I'm going to go with sweet.
I love that. Love it.
I can go next. My name is Anjali. I'm she, her, and I would say bitter, but in a good way, like a bitter coffee. Giving some energy.
Love that.
I'm Maureen, she, her, and I'm definitely feeling a citrus tang today.
Yes, citrusy, so good. Well, now that we're hungry, last call. Okay, all right. So like, excuse the Guy Fieri, but let's get into the actual workshop. So a little bit about me. Julian covered most of it. I have 4 chapbooks out. My first full length is coming in October with Fifth Wheel Press. Bonus features for me, I teach high school English, high school like mindfulness, yoga, both at the public high school where I teach and at a studio. I'm a poet. And about this workshop, so this is generative. So ideally, you are walking with zero pressure, of course. You're walking away with either, so, and you have a piece to workshop or draw from that might result in an entirely new piece, a new series, so something that you see that can be serialized. A motif for a chapbook or a collection, and say like, oh, like I really like this concept that's in this one poem, but I think this one poem could be like 7 poems. Amazing. Or a revised and polished piece. And also some seeds. So shout out to Amy Beth Sisson, who always calls them seeds for writing. So a little gratitude to her for that. All right, and if at any point you have any questions while I'm talking over about stuff, you can throw those in the chat. So what is revision? So we'll do a little bit of like mini lecture, then we'll get into the actual like generative portion. So revision is, if you think about the word revision, it's revision, it's seeing again. So it's looking at something that you have in a new way. So consider, what are you not seeing because you're only seeing what you're seeing? If you're looking at this poem and that you've written, you're like, oh, I don't like love it, but your impression of that poem is more so from the memory of reading it rather than reading it in the present moment. So there's a sense of like presence within the art of revision. Examining your work from another perspective. Can you read this with fresh eyes? Can you read this after you've read something that contrasts it or serves as a juxtaposition to it? Or can you read something afterwards to kind of affirm the things that you want in this piece? Maybe you read the piece and then read a paragraph if you're working in prose by your one of your favorite authors, and not necessarily in a comparative sense, but see like where are things that can be kind of judged in your own writing. A shifting of ideas, of concepts, of themes, organizations. All right, I see merging, I see that theme emerging, but I really just want this one. So I'm going to add more here and take away this. Or you could do the same thing with a motif, with a word, with a refrain. It's different than editing. So the way that I'm going to define this just for this workshop is that editing is more so about like strictly word choice, about adding or removing articles like a or the. It's about punctuation. Do I want a period here? Do I want a semicolon? Do I want 2 separate sentences? And this can get like a little bit, well, is this revision? Is this editing? For our purposes, we're just going to talk about it in terms of how are you changing and how is your work evolving. So our today, we're going to have essentially 10 writing blocks. So the first will be to reduce, which means to trim content or otherwise. The second will be to reuse. So reusing something within your actual piece. And the last will be recycling. So creating something new from either what you've taken out or what remains. So to prep for revision, take like a minute or so and either make a copy of the document that you brought, like a digital copy, or what I do if I'm workshopping something is I will either do 3, like an ellipses, and then do the next page, or set this up in a way that you have an easily accessible and like malleable piece. And if you're like, I didn't bring anything, that's great. You can either start from scratch, go into your archives, or I don't know how everyone will feel about this, but if you're stuck, what you could do is this would be a whole other workshop, but I'm going to say it anyway. You could even take like your favorite poem and then see what you can do to that, not in any kind of offense to the author, but in terms of that serving as an inspiration for it. So then if you were writing a piece from that, it would have like the title and then for Rita Dove, like for Gwendolyn Brooks. So for Walt Whitman or after Walt Whitman. So just as an idea. So take like 60 seconds, get your documents ready. Julian already said, get your beverages, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Ooh, look at that mocktail. I love that, Julian. Okay. And if you're still like getting that ready or still prepping, know that we will have like 10 minutes for each aspect of this. So first is, what do I mean by reuse? So by reuse, choosing one part of a larger story, maybe one part of a short story. Maybe it's just the opening scene, that opening part that you draw out. If you're doing poetry, maybe you just choose your favorite stanza, like this is the best stanza, and I'm just going to scrap absolutely everything else. Maybe you're cutting out lines, maybe you're cutting out characters if it's fiction again. Maybe you go in and you eliminate certain words. It could be editing. Maybe you eliminate all of the articles, all of the A's, these. Maybe you eliminate all of the pronouns, me, mine, I, you. Just and seeing how that changes what you have. Any ing words, like we love ing words, they're great, but take them out or change them to not being ing words, taking out any to be words. Just as suggestions, if you're like, but I love this, like this is blank, like amazing, leave it, but it becomes more powerful, or it can become more powerful when that's the only to be verb that you have in your poem, in your piece. And consider, like, how specific can you be? How much can you distill your writing? And even reduction doesn't necessarily have to mean taking things out. It could also be becoming much, much more specific. So, any questions? All right. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to reduce. I'm going to put what I'm defining as reducing into the chat as well, so you have that. It'll just take me a moment to organize everything on my screen. Here it is. All right. All right, and I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. All right, that is our timer. And if you're like, oh, I need more time, like that's great. That's really great. All right. So just a moment for an optional share. So you can share what you did, what worked, what's coming up for you, and or what did you discover? So feel free to put it in the chat. You can raise your hand or just start speaking. Yeah, Melissa.
You know, it's always really interesting because when I write the work and I finish it, it feels like everything's there that needs to be there. And then you gave us this prompt, and I went back and I took out maybe like 50 words, 100 words. And it's just amazing that with external encouragement, maybe see possibilities that weren't there before.
Yeah, absolutely. That like, oh, you could like it's still safe. You still have the original, but like, all right. Anjali.
Thanks. Music can be really moving and beautiful. And so I had written a piece about just the harmony of an orchestra. And then I took out all of the words that ended in ing, and I started to like replace them with other things. And it just elevated the creativity or like the depth of the piece, because you can just choose another word and it completely, not that it completely changes it, but it adds texture to the experience that I'm trying to describe. And then there's a lot of options. And so it became like yeah, it just was a nice exercise.
Oh, great. I love your use of the word texture too, how like removing the ing words can add another like texture to it. All right. Anyone else with hand raised, and then I'll move to the chat. Zero pressure. Oh yeah, Maureen.
I often find with my writing that I overwrite and lay out too much of what my thought is instead of relying on the reader to do some interpreting. So for me, it's about backing off and leaving more open-endedness or vagueness. Yeah. Thanks.
And that's so cool that you bring up also the relationship between like the writer and reader almost as one of trust. Like you can trust your reader to understand what this implies, or you can trust your reader to read like in between the lines in that way. Yeah, that's really great. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. And then in the chat we have Sarah says, I'm finding some nice patterns and grouping them together like travel or food. Ooh, yeah. Oh, what great topics, right? I mean, you know how I feel about food. Yes, love that. And cool how like you can group them together for something new to be generated from this. So let's move back to the slideshow. So next is reuse. Right, I just talked about food, and here's a picture of a sandwich. You'll understand why though. So for reusing, consider what already exists within the text and how can that be repurposed or used as a refrain? How can that be repeated? So establishing a theme or motif for a collection or even within a work itself, repeating that idea, repeating that phrasing, but in different contexts or in different ways. Choosing a word, image, or phrase to repeat. You can add minor variations. Like in music, I meant to keep it up, but in Chapel Roan's song "Good Luck Babe," there is one line that's you just want someone to call you baby, and then in the next bridge, it's I just want someone to call me baby. So those like little teeny tiny variations, and we see those in things like duplexes also. Adding an epigraph. So now that you have this, how can you reuse? And reuse either something that you've written somewhere else, or how can you reuse something that someone else has already written? Or like, oh, I love this poem, I'm going to use this as an epigraph, or I'm going to take a first line from this poet with credit, of course, or add a phrase from work as the title, like in Maggie Smith's Good Bones. Good Bones are towards the end of the poem itself. And then that was chosen as the title to kind of come back up and then to reframe what happens in the rest of the poem. You could also reuse like your favorite line or something like that as and then that means just like the last of of each line is that line in and of itself. And that's, you can Google these, you can ask me about them if you have information. So those are ways to reuse stuff. So then go back into your text and think about what are things that I can reuse. Do I want to make a refrain from anything, especially like, not especially, but because my primary genre is poetry, I think about sounds. So what do I want to, if I've already chosen all of my words, are there words that have better sounds that fit with what I want to have happen? So we're going, oh, also an acrostic. Like, it seems really simple in elementary schoolish. That's one where, like, instead of having a golden shovel on the right that forms a sentence, on the beginning of the left side, the first letter of each word spells like spells a word. You could also think of like an abecedarian, which is a line starts with A, line starts with B, etc. But there are lots of ways that you can reuse elements of this even without knowing like all of these different poetry forms. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to reuse now, and I will put all of this text in the chat so you have it. There you go. All right, 10 minutes. Right, that is 10 minutes. So optional, share. What did you do? Same questions as last time. What did you do? What worked? What's coming up for you? And or what did you discover? So feel free to unmute, to raise your hand, to put it in the chat. All right, Krishna.
Hey, I use repetition sometimes in my various poems, and when I was going back and thinking, let me add some, because I didn't think that this particular poem had very much repetition, and I realized it does. So it seems like I'm really drawn to that as a form. But it was nice. I was able to kind of reuse certain lines, and actually ended up creating a new, more concise ending to this. So that was something that I didn't expect, but it was kind of exciting.
That's super, that's so cool, because you like reduced and then you like reused, and then that ended up causing like a reduction anyway. Like that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Anyone else? I also like dance when my high school students, when I'm waiting for them, I'm just like, just like moving. All right, so let's, for the sake of time, let's move on to the last part of this. Last is recycle. So I realized I didn't explain the club sandwich in the other one, but I think everyone understood it, like the idea of repetition and like all that delicious bread in between. Anyway, recycle, this is a spinning wheel. So scrap the old for something entirely new. What to take with you. So you can take a favorite line or a few lines. I was going to actually get a copy of the poem. I was reading one of Chen Chen's like older, like his first full collection. And I realized that one of the poems towards the end of the collection, one of the lines from that was the title to a different poem that was earlier in the collection. So I was thinking about this shows that you can take a line from what you've written if you feel like it's finished, or even if not, and then use that to generate a companion piece to it. So you can either take a favorite line or a few lines, take an idea with corresponding imagery, maybe think everything you wrote was about a pine tree, and then maybe you write about that pine tree in a different season, or maybe you write about a different tree in the same area, or even like what's in the tree, zooming in or zooming out of that. Also consider how to make it new. You can change form. I took a line from a free verse poem that I had and then used that as like the first line in a duplex. Or if you find that you have two lines that kind of rhyme with each other, like that's a villanelle. That's like those are the final lines of a sonnet. You can also change the genre or the point of view. I was talking to a writer friend the other day, and they were saying that you could also, if you were reading something that you wrote, and maybe you're like, oh, this is actually more memoir than it is creative nonfiction. And then, or if something feels too close to you, if it is memoir, then can you fictionalize it? Can you take an aspect of that and then turn it into fiction? You can do that with poetry also. Can you move it to the title or as a refrain, or have that be a part of a series? So maybe your poem that you've just written, or the piece that you've just wrapped up, if that's where you are, maybe that becomes the first in a series, or maybe that's a poem that frames a whole other collection. So from here, you could also consider the first line is also the title. It's something I did a separate Blue Stoop workshop about titling your poems. But one thing that you can do if you're unsure about what you want to have for the title, or if you think your first line is the strongest line, what happens if you bump that up to the title and then make your second line your first line? So again, going back to that idea of Maggie Smith's Good Bones, even though that's not what she did in that poem, thinking how you can use something that's already within the poem as the title or as a framing device. So now I'm gonna say, let's do like 6 or 7 minutes to recycle. And I'm going to put these suggestions or prompts in the chat. And then we'll come back one final time. All right, 6 minutes. Right, that is time. So optional, Sharon, let's keep this like short-ish because we only have about 5 minutes left. So you can share, what did you do, what worked, what's coming up for you, or what did you discover, or you can read us something, or what are your takeaways? Any of those, all of those, none of the above?
I don't know if I'm seen. I have a weird camera situation, but I can't
Yep.
see myself. So can you see me? Well, what I ended up doing was I had pulled up several poems. And so I did a kind of found poem exercise with mixing several things together that were open on my computer, and came up with a new combination of things that was kind of interesting. So I can read it or not. It doesn't matter. I think other people might have other things to say, but it was, I was working on this one poem for most of the afternoon, and then I had this other poem up, and I said, oh, well, let me look at this. And then I kind of like combined them with lines, and they're nothing like each other otherwise. So it added new that one is kind of disgusting in terms of its imagery, and one is very graceful and elegiac. So it was an interesting. It was interesting to combine them.
That's awesome. That's great. And I'm like, oh, it's the remix, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Just for sake of time, anyone else want to share anything that came up for them or anything that they discovered? Great poem collage. All right, let me get to my last little slide, and then we can stop recording. And then if people want to share things that they wrote, if we have like a moment, we can do that. So thank you for being here. If you want more of me, this is my website, a little QR code. Who knows how long that'll work? But my website is there. That's my email. Email me anything, anytime. Happy to help support being community. And I'm at the Origin Allison. So it's like original and Allison, but portmanteaued on Instagram and Twitter. So maybe we can stop recording and then have some poem sharing if people feel so inclined.
Yeah, we can do that. I just real quick, while I still have the camera on, I will plug the blue stoop things and then hand it back. Does that work? Okay.
Yep, amazing.
Just so it's on camera and so everyone hears me say it, thank you to Allison for running this session. Thank you to everyone who participated today. I'm going to share a few links in the chat. You can learn more about Blue Stoop offerings like these other Thursdays on the Stoop sessions. There's another one next week called Writing the Wounded Character, How Feelings, Emotion, and Fear Function in Plot with Emily John Tobias. And there's also a feedback survey. You can tell Allison what a fantastic job they did. And if you love these offerings, you want to help Blue Stoop keep delivering them, there's a donation link as well. So thank you for that. Appreciate your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much.